All right, here we go. Back at the Legacy Project. I'm here alongside Bryce. What's going on, Bryce?
How we doing, guys?
Doing well. Doing really well. It's a beautiful day. It's a little bit brisk. It's hoodie weather, as we like to call it. We got a special guest from Florida. So hopefully he's above water now, man. Why don't you introduce yourself, what you do, who you are to all the people watching us here?
How you doing? I'm Joey Guarascio. I'm the head strength and conditioning coach for FAU, Florida Atlantic University. I've been here 3 years, been coaching in college 12 years. I saw you had Coach Moffitt on here last week. I interned for him back in 2011. That's one
Wow.
that's the guy right there. So that's pretty cool to see him on here. But just in charge of preparation for the football team specifically, and then oversee the rest of the department. I got 5 assistants under me, plus a sports scientist and nutritionist, so a bunch of interns. That's basically what I do.
Wow. So your focus is mainly going to be football?
Yeah. So I oversee football and programs directly for football. In my career, I've done any and every sport you could probably think of. That's just how it is, especially when you're coming up as an assistant. I was at a bunch of small schools, so there was one point in time I was training like 9 teams, which was insane. But it gives you a lot of diversity, and then it also gives you a lot of wisdom and experience. You train different teams, different athletes, different type of kids, and it really helps out the problem solving of not only understand what's important to train for the sport, but then also how to attack different kids, right? Like you get the kids, your volleyball girls are different than your softball girls versus your receivers kind of act like the softball girls a little bit, and so much and so forth.
Oh, man. I don't know if you know Coach Dave Andrews. I think he's at Pitt right now. He came from University of Cincinnati. He was at Notre Dame for a while. He was at Illinois. For a while, he was coaching the basketball team, and he was a linebacker at the Ohio State University. And it would drive him nuts, the basketball players, because they weren't let's say they didn't have the same mindset as a linebacker from OSU would have. So he would have comments similar to that, but laced with a lot more profanity. So yeah, Coach Dave. If you don't know Coach, we got to get Coach Dave. Coach Dave is he's a large, intimidating man. So yeah, so it's funny you say that. Now, what really strikes me is that you're a strength and conditioning. You're basically, you make athletes bigger, faster, stronger, and less likely to get injured. Is that a pretty good description of what you do?
Yeah, it's a simplified view. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
I'm a simplified guy. I'm not very smart. So you have that. So going to all the sports that you coach, right? You got basketball and volleyball and football, whatever, coach. What is it? How difficult is it when you're programming? Let's say you're programming for a volleyball player versus a wrestler. Are there certain things that stay consistent or stay the same? Are there certain things you keep in there? What are the variables that you would find to differentiate the sports? Obviously, we have similar movements in all sport. How would you go about explaining, like, let's say you have a volleyball player and a wrestler? What would be the difference in how you would program for that athlete or those athletes?
I think you have to you have to break down and look at the sport itself first, right? So, like, what do they do? So, like, we say volleyball, there's really 3 positions in volleyball. There's strikers, there's the libero, and then there's the back. And even there's differences in their movement skills and things that they do, even though it's very similar, right? It's like similar to a shortstop to a second baseman.
Yeah.
But everybody knows that second base is different than shortstop.
Yep.
I think you have to break down the mechanical stresses that's involved with the sport. So how many times they jump? What are the impact forces? What are the primary? Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? Is it how plyometric is it? All these different things. Like you look at football, like how much high speed yardage? What are the average miles per hour? What are the average collisions? All these different things. Then I think you got to break down the biological side of it as well. So what are the rest to work ratios? What's the average match time? All those things that go into it. What are the primary pathways, the metabolic pathways that are going to result in higher performance, right? What are the energy demands? All those different things. I think once you break that down and you get that picture in your head, it becomes pretty simple, because now it's just like playing Go Fish, right? Like, I have an ace, I need another ace. There, I finally got an ace. There it is. Let's match them together. So, like, you look at wrestling, like, there's a huge lactate demand on wrestling, right? It's a grappling sport, right? There's explosive bouts. Isometric strength is at a premium for wrestling, right? Because they got to hold positions, but they also got to be able to hold positions for long periods of time. So, like, versus your volleyball player who technically is just an absolute power athlete.
Yep.
That's what they are. Like, I mean, average serve time, I think when I looked at it back, and this is a while ago, but I think it was like anywhere between 8 to 11 seconds is an average volley time. That's nothing. And then I think that if I'm not mistaken, the average rest time was almost a minute between.
Yeah,
so like when you look at that's an alactic event. Like that's power. That's in a power sport. They have to worry about jumping and cutting, and that's really it. And they have to be really good at reacting. All right. So that's going to be a lot different than a wrestler who, there is jumping and cutting involved in wrestling, but it's way different of a style. It's again, you got to break down what the sport does first. That's got to be the main priority, because there's going to be crossover with everything, right? Like the physical capacities are physical capacities. So capacities, how much I can produce, right? So strength, speed, like all these different things. Like how much can I produce? But then there's general skills, and that's where you see the real difference, right? A general skill for a wrestler is not going to be jumping, but it is going to be a general skill for volleyball is jumping, right? But a general skill for wrestling is going to be a sprawl.
Yeah.
Like being able to get off the ground fast, like that's a general skill versus, and then you climb the continuum of specificity and you get into specific skills, which like for a volleyball player is going to be like a bump or the way that they serve or the way that they spike, or a wrestler, how they double leg takedown, or, how they get out of bottom position, or how they get out of the referee's position, all these different things, right? Those are specific skills. So once you start to climb down from specificity to general, it becomes, like I said, it's easy. It's matching. It's a matching game. I need to provide this to make sure that they're able to handle it in a match. Okay, that they're robust enough. So I build up those skills, that capacity high enough that they could withstand a match. Then what I do is I also look at the performance side of it. What makes elite athletes in whatever sport we're talking about elite? If it's an offensive tackle, well, they have extremely fast feet and they have a powerful punch. Okay, well, I probably need to train that on the performance side to make sure that, this guy's got a shot to be a good player.
Yeah.
So now that he can handle practice, let's up everything else to make sure that he can not only just be out there, but he's making a difference. Same thing could go for volleyball and all these things, right? If I increase a volleyball's vertical or their approach jump by 3 inches, right? That's a factor that's going to determine whether they're elite or not. Like, so those are the performance sides of it. Now I got to make sure that they can withstand doing an approach jump about 60 times in a match.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's the injury resilience side. And that's where, because what we have to understand is you build specific skills in practice.
Yep.
So in order to build specific skills in practice, it has to be outside of fatigue, meaning that they have to, now fatigue is going to be present, but they have to be able to withstand fatigue and still be focused enough and have the energy reserves enough to be intentful in their movement.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not intentful in their movement, they're going through the motions, they don't get better. You're not developing skills.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to expose them to high levels of that in the offseason. So they have that reserve. I always talk about building reserves, like whether it's speed reserve, which like Charlie Francis made really popular, was speed reserve, right? If I run 22 miles an hour, okay, and you run 20, we both get tired. I run 18, you run 16, I still win.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's my reserve, right? Or if I squat 600 pounds, but I have to do 405 for reps, and you squat 400 pounds and you have to do 405 for reps, I could do more because I have a higher reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's that idea about building reserves of those general qualities, those general skills. Like deceleration is a big one that I've gotten into, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
I was just going to ask you about that actually as you kind of transitioned.
Because you look at like a lot of these injuries, like especially in the NFL, like you look at Odell Beckham in the Super Bowl, like he was in deceleration, he tore his ACL.
Yep.
You look at Sterling Sharp or Shepard, like he just tore his ACL. He was decelerating. Yeah, he was jogging. But he was stopping. He was jogging and he was stopping, and then it just goes. So you look at a lot of those, like that's another general skill is deceleration in itself, but it's also a capacity, meaning like peak eccentric force and peak rate of force are going to play into that. So like if you don't have those reserves, right? What happened was he didn't have the reserves to withstand that many decelerations, so he fatigued. Okay, he fatigued. And then because he's tired, he doesn't have the force capabilities or the proprioception to handle that step, and that's what happened. I mean, it went bad.
Yeah, it went bad really quick. And
it looked like nothing, right? And everyone all of a sudden he's screaming, grabbing his knee.
Yeah, it was.
You look at Saquon on the sideline with that non-contact he had 2 years ago. It was the same deal. it's the same deal.
I mean, and can you explain, like, for people out there to understand that deceleration is a general skill? Because most people, as you know, they just focus on, I'd say majority of the time, max velocity, which is 100% fine. I want to be fast. I want kids to be fast. But the separating skill is, along with that, is being able to decelerate at rapid rates.
Yeah, and a lot of the research out there is from Damian Harper. So, I mean, if you Google Scholar, Damian Harper's name, about 15 research papers will pop up. And the thing is this, right? Like you talked about, like, I want guys to run fast. Everybody wants everyone to run fast. Everyone wants everyone to jump high. And we talk about the reason that is because we want to create separation.
Yep.
Right? So, like, on a football field, I want my guys to run fast to separate on offense and to close really fast on defense, right? So it's like always the opposite on both sides. Okay, well, how many times do my receivers actually hit top speed? Very rarely. Not that we don't train max velocity, but I train it all the time because of the cascade effect it has to other attributes, right? And it's the ultimate athletic quality, in my opinion. But they're very rarely, like maybe 3 to 4 times an entire game. But how many times do they cut? How many times do they stop? And we look at
every play.
That it's anywhere between, like, a significant cut is anywhere between 30 to 60 times in a game.
Yeah, and basketball is, oh my God, I think basketball is like almost triple that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe even more than that.
So for us, it was like, if we're not training their breaks, we talk about getting separation, right? So, like, there's 2 factors that go into stopping: the distance to stop and the time to stop. Right? So they're both important. Like, one's more force-based, which is going to be the distance, and then time to stop is going to be more rate of force, right? So if I can make my athletes stop quicker and shorter, I can create way more separation or close space faster than if I was just to focus on the propulsive side of it.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Because change of direction, the underpinning determining factor for change of direction is deceleration capabilities. That's what they found. So everyone loves to talk about change of direction work, right?
Actually, stop.
Change direction. If you can't break at high speeds quickly and forcefully, you're not going to change direction fast.
No,
and that's, I mean, it goes back to one of your tracking videos, and even, oh God, what's his name? Andrew Ryland's tracking videos. Being able to,
he's awesome, by the way.
Yeah, he is. He's awesome. I've talked to him, I think, once, but I was on a completely different subject. But you look at those and being able to, obviously accelerate or be in max velocity, whatever you want to say right now, but being able to rapidly decelerate, but also track at the same time is extremely hard, especially going at that fast a speed for Division I players. And like you said, I don't think it's actually honed in enough compared to what you see, I'd say, just in social media and majority of research besides that guy. So I think it's huge for people to understand how important deceleration is in a multifaceted approach, whether it is offense or defense or whatever sport it is.
Yeah.
So when I look at football, I think there's 4 general skills, right? Like 4 general skills, and the skills that I look at is acceleration, maximum velocity, change of direction, and deceleration. Like, those are the 4 things. No matter what position you play, there's some level of that at all those positions. Right, those are the general skills. Those feed the specific skills. So, like you talk about, if you're not good at accelerating, it's going to be really hard to be a good defender.
Yep.
Because how do you close space? How do you track? Like, if they could just outrun you, like, you could do a great job tracking them, but you can't catch them.
Yep.
All right. But the opposite too is like, okay, if I'm really fast, but I have terrible breaks, right? I can't stop. I could be great at tracking, but if I can't stop, I can't get in a position to make a good tackle. That's where you see guys, the feet slide out from under them and all those different things. So again, it builds into the specific skills. Excuse me. There's got to be a continuum of training, right? And as you go from the early off season to pre-camp or whatever you get into the almost season, it's got to go from general to specific.
Yep.
So when I look at it, like, early off season, I'm building capacities. I'm building reserves, right? I'm building peak force. I'm building rate of force. I'm building endurance, which is just the ability to repeat something over and over again. People mess that up all the time, right? Like, because they think endurance is like running like miles and doing cross.
Well, I mean, if you're a runner, yeah, it's one of those things.
It blow your mind. Like even track, like, and I've gotten into track because my son's into track, and it's like some of these coaches, like, yeah, we're doing an endurance block, and I'm like, the kid runs a 60 meter and a 100 meter. What are you doing? And then we're running for 20 minutes straight. I'm like, how is that helping that kid?
Bryce, what did you copy me in that one time on Twitter, the volleyball program?
Oh yeah,
where they're running like 20 miles or some shit.
Yeah, it was the most absurd conditioning test I've ever seen in my entire life.
It was for volleyball, where literally they're on the equivalent of a basketball court, half of it. Like, and they're surrounded by other people. So their movement is literally 2 steps laterally, linearly, or backwards, right? And they have these poor girls running like, I'm talking like 1 mile, I'm cramping and I'm probably going to fall down and cry, right? They have these poor girls who are completely anaerobic their whole entire life. They have them running these distances and it's just absurd, but you see it all the time, and you see it in where the training doesn't match up with what your actual activity is. So yeah, I see that 100%.
Well, so I worked for a guy, all right, and this is early in my career, and he loves stadiums, like continuous stadiums.
Oh God.
All right. And I try to talk him out of it. And one day I'm standing next, because there's not any coaching, like you outside of screaming or hurry up, like you're not coaching much, right? You're like a friggin' plane directing, you know, like,
yeah,
go to the next stair, go up the stairs. Like, what are you coaching?
There to watch.
Yeah. So me and him end up getting in the conversation, and he's like, how come our best players are in the back? And I'm like, our starting running backs in the back, our best receiver, our best DB. And I'm like, Coach, because they're fast twitch. They're our best. They're our twitchiest guys. They're our most explosive guys, which means they fatigue the fastest, Coach. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so when you do something continuous for over 30 to 90 seconds even, like these guys blow up. Like they're producing way more lactate, okay? Their central nervous system is firing at way higher of a rate, so they get more central fatigue. Like, and he was like, damn. And then that was the day, like, it turned. He's like, I was like, I bet if you put them in a race, I bet all those guys beat the guys in the front. And he's like, hey, no, but the funny thing is, he's like, let's do it tomorrow. I was like, okay. And all those guys in the back beat all those guys in the front.
Of course they did. Of course they did.
And then he was like, oh shit, let's get rid of stadiums. You know, I was like, okay.
I love the old adage. You ever hear the conversation piece where they compare sprinters' bodies to marathoners' bodies, right? Yeah. And there's the different muscle twitches there. It's fascinating because you have slow twitch, fast twitch, and then those little in-between fibers. I forgot what they're called scientifically, the X fibers or whatever, where they can go either way. And that's where you can convert it via your training method. But you're born with these fast twitch and slow twitch. And what's crazy is that you compare a marathon runner to a sprinter. The difference is the sprinter is literally born to look like that. That is how their muscles fire. They are sprinters. You probably couldn't take, let's take, even though the whole, like, let's take Ben Johnson or let's take Usain Bolt. I doubt they'd be good marathon runners. They run, but different kind of running. And they look way different than their slow twitch counterparts. And you could usually tell, like you talked about Saquon earlier. Look at that dude's quads. That guy doesn't have a slow twitch muscle fiber in his entire body.
Yeah, he's a monster.
Yeah,
it's insane.
But I think, like, going back to what you said about why is your son, you know, essentially running long distance for a short 60 meters or 100 meters. Like, can you explain to people what you do with your son in I'll say a brief, you know, couple sentences? Because if you follow Coach Joey on Twitter, you see it all the time, what he's doing with his son. And it's, you know, it's nothing rocket science or crazy, but it's just the continuous evolution of what you've been able to do with him. Just even by following, you can see the continuum that he's kind of gone through.
Yeah, I mean, people think I'm like putting him in boot camp, and I'm, you know, like, you ever seen like those kid swap shows where like the guy that you have the crazy military dad.
Oh, the parent swap.
Yeah, no, we don't.
People, I've heard all the accusations.
Yeah, he definitely does the same thing. I mean, Mark has what? All right, Cammy's 17, 16, Thomas is 14, and Preston's 9. So they all train and like actually train, not work out. Like Cammy pulled what? Oh,
well, I mean, she's pulled almost 400 hex bar, but she pulled over 300 in competition in powerlifting,
and she can move. So it's funny actually seeing both of you in the same room with going through that. But, you know, please, by all means, I would love to.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is this, is like I was an athlete. I was a football player in college. I was like right at that Division I-ish level as far as athleticism goes. I had good size. I didn't have top end speed. I wasn't fast enough. And when I had my son, I was like, well, now I know what I'm doing. I've been a strength coach I think I was a strength coach for 5 years at the time I had him. He's 8 years old now. And I was like, man, like if he wants to, if he enjoys it, like I'll introduce him to some things as the years go on. And whatever sport he wants to play, we'll just maximize his genetic potential. And that's what it was. It was like, okay, does he like it? Cool. Like I remember the first day he picked up a kettlebell, like it was like a 20-pound kettlebell. He was like 2 years old, and he picked it up and he started laughing. And I'm like, oh, okay, he's gonna like it, And you make it a fun environment, and then you just learn and teach him. And my thing is this: is like I started off just teaching like really fundamental positions and fundamental movements, like how to squat the right way, like how to press overhead the right way, how to do a real chin up, how to do a lunge the right way. I'm sprint biased. I love speed training, and I expose them to just low level plyometrics, things that kids do at
recess.
Yeah. And the problem is there's no. And me and my son, we actually got in this discussion. There's no more recess. There's no more playgrounds.
No.
So you're not getting that stimulus. So it's like it's rare for a kid to go to a basketball court and just play pickup basketball now.
You're right.
Yeah. Well,
it doesn't exist. At least maybe in the inner city somewhere there's still pickup games, but like you drive around here, there's not really.
No,
but it's all gone to clubs. So a lot of the athletic kids who would be on the playground, their parents are chucking out thousands a year for little Billy to play club soccer or club basketball or club baseball. So it's kind of transitioned where it's kind of the haves and have nots, and you're seeing this is so far beyond this, but you're seeing almost a wealth gap between fit and unfit, because there's no more like when I played Little League, it was like $30 a year. Now these kids are paying 10 grand a year for travel baseball. It's just the continuum's crazy. But what we do as coaches, I mean, it's really, but the average person couldn't teach their kid a proper squat. I remember you lived in the area. We lived in Illinois. I remember watching parents take their kids to export and seeing the craziest stuff. So you need to hire a professional, but a lot of things we do with kids are basic fundamentals. If a kid drops something, he's going to drop into a perfect squat to pick it up.
Yeah.
But we've changed. Like we've become lazier, become more complacent. We have more video games. There's less go outside and play. So that's where we come in.
But I think that's the thing is, and like both you guys kind of said in different ways, like if you go back, I don't know, I'd be shocked if I had any, but you go back, you look at our years compared to kids nowadays, that recess is gone 100%. And I completely agree. But look at all the different, and it sounds so weird, but kind of like Coach Joey said, like you go back and you rewind yourself and, you're playing Sandman or freeze tag. Like you get tagged, you got to stop, hit the brakes, decelerate, jump on the ground, off the ground for certain objects off, and, we'll say whatever hot lava tag or whatever it's called, but that's all missing, but it's all key components, for an athlete over time.
Well, they're skipping steps, and that's what the problem is. Like you guys hit on the head is you're getting a lot of kids, and I see it down here, is you get a lot of kids that specialize and they specialize early. Like they're skipping steps of general athleticism.
Yes.
So people are like, they look at, oh, well, you're using advanced means for a kid and this and that. And I'm like, well, he's still a human. Right? Like he's still a human. Like when like everyone's like, well, kids, and there's maturation periods where you can maximize specific abilities. Like in between 8 and 11 years old is a great time to build elasticity.
Yes.
That's what science has proven. The same when you're 14 to 18 is a great time to build elasticity. Like those are growth periods in those tendons. So it's like, why wouldn't I want to maximize that? Like knowing my genetics that he has running in his body, like he has my blood in his body. And one of the main issues that I had was my top speed was dog shit because my reactive strength wasn't very good. I wasn't very bouncy. I was a very strong jump high type kid, but I could never translate it to overall speed on the football field.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't I want to maximize that in my son?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, it's very advanced. I'm like, the kid's been training 4 years. for you saying like him bounding at 8 years old is too much. I'm like, he was doing power skips at 5.
I can't believe bounding at 8 years old is considered. That should be.
I just bounded yesterday with an 8-year-old.
Jumping over puddles. What we used to do is like, messing around down the street. But kids don't do that. But then the same people that, say, oh, how could you let your kid lift weights? And they bring their kid to a basketball gym on a Saturday to play in a tournament, and the kid plays, 6 games in a weekend.
Yeah.
Or they make their son, and this is a new one for me, like my son, he got recruited to be on a child baseball team. Because I refused to pay for the shit. I was like, I'm not doing it.
God bless you.
And they recruited us, and they were like, yeah, we'll cut the rate down, all this stuff. Like, he's too good not to be on our team, all that. So I was like, sure. I was like, if I got to just pay for a uniform and that's it, I'm good with it. Like, let's roll. But the first time it's kid pitch, the first exposure to kid pitch, and one of the kids on the team threw 80 pitches. And I'm like, 80 pitches is a lot for an MLB guy. Like, I'm not about – and then we wonder why kids are 11 years old getting Tommy John.
Yep.
What's really nuts, I don't know if you get this a lot, but I just sticky this comment. So do you get a lot of the whole, like, you're abusing your kids, you're stunting their growth, these crazy – and Travis Mash actually did a great review on stunting growth in youth athletes. But what's funny is you talk about lifting and you talk about real life, how we're skipping steps. And they talk about, okay, we're going to have this kid – let's say deadlifting 100 pounds is going to stunt their growth, right? Have you ever seen a farmer's kid? Like, these kids are baling hay. These kids are lifting heavy objects. What about kids who fall on a playground? You know the amount of force generated?
I laugh because that's whenever someone does that, I have it saved on my phone, and I'm kind of a jackass on Twitter sometimes with my replies. And all I do is I have 4 screenshots of research papers that are longevity studies. So they're over like 15, 20 years on maturation and early exposure to weightlifting. And all the studies said that it promoted greater bone density, greater muscle mass, right? Just basically healthier adults from being athletes early, right? So I just tagged them with that. But like, to your point, like, you jump, here's the thing. If I jump off a 18-inch box, I experience 4 times body mass and force to the ground. Yep. All right. Mm-hmm. I've seen my son jump down in 8 steps, over 8 steps, and land. Wow. All right. And it had to be close to 8-9 feet.
That's a 1,000-pound deadlift.
That's what I'm saying. Like he probably experienced like 12 times body weight into his ankles, knees, everything. And he popped up like nothing and just started jogging down the street. I'm like, did he really just do that? That's crazy. So, people, again, they'll go and watch their son or daughter play 4 soccer matches in a weekend or play 6 basketball games in a weekend and not bat an eye at it, right? And then bring them to their specialist, their shot coach, or, their dribbling coach, or, private BP practice and all this shit. And yet, when my son, who's squatting relatively light compared to his body weight, he's squatting a 45-pound bar, they get up there and they're like, well, you're killing your kid. How dare you do that? All those things. And I'm like, this is a general skill. Like, this is general qualities that are going to maximize all the specific shit you're doing now. This is chess, not checkers. Yep. All right. You're playing checkers right now. All right. Because your kid is A, going to get burnt out. Okay. And B, there's going to be a plateau that happens because he needs to increase his general capacities versus specific skills. Yep. Where I'm building general capacities over time and exposing them and getting them stronger. Like, when is a high school football coach ever said, "Oh, you're too strong"?
Never. Right? Ever since the 1960s, when they thought it slowed you down. Yeah. I mean, so what's really crazy about all of this is you're saying things we talk about all the time. And you look at these kids, we're also not our kids. It's a progression, right? Like, so my kids have been training since around 6. My girls are smarter than boys. Girls pick up on things better. They're just smarter. And so my daughter was able to start earlier than my sons, but it's not like I just took my 14-year-old son, loaded 225 pounds on a barbell and told him to squat. that's over double his body weight, or told him to deadlift triple his body. Those are things we've been working on with regressions. We've been building him up to that. So you don't just take, and this is where I fear is that people will listen to us and be like, hey, these guys, your kids are really good at stuff. We should get them deadlifting and squatting. So they take little Billy and they put little Billy on under the squat rack, put like 135 on the bar. Little Billy slips a disc in his back. So what we need to educate people on is to hire proper coaches, and it's hard to find. That's another thing, man. I don't know if you have this out there. Our peers, at least locally, are absolute garbage when it comes to coaching. Like the strength coaching community is not where we need it to be as far as the stuff we're talking about, as far as, regressions, as far as progressions, as far as how to build a kid up. You talk about pitching all these innings. My daughter's soccer team, every year they lose 20% of the girls' ACLs. Just, you can mark it down. We're going to lose 2 out of 10. We're just going to lose 2 out of 10. And another thing is we have girls this year presenting with major back issues and hip issues in their teens before 18. And the reason is what you're talking about, that repetitive motion, the club sports. You're playing one sport year round. We were kids. I played, I know I'm kind of short. I played basketball. I played soccer. I played football. I played baseball. I played every sport. I was on the fucking swim team in junior high. Okay, I played every sport, moving through these multiple planes. What happens? You have a right dominant leg girl, and from the age of 5 years old until 17, she's just moving through one plane, kicking a soccer ball, and she might be working with a speed school, but the speed school does not know how to work on their deficiencies to balance out what they've done, the damage they've done, or they're doing over the years. That's why you're going to see a huge presentation of injuries in these specialized athletes, and it's getting worse and worse every year. Soccer's year round, volleyball's year round, football is the one sport that's kind of still a high school seasonal sport. All these year round sports, you're going to see kids getting injured and injured and injured. So I ask you, what do you see? What would your advice be to parents? Let's say you got this guy Corey on here. He's having fun commenting. Okay, what would you say to Corey? Corey has a kid, let's say, and his kid's a great soccer player. What would you do to prevent this kid from getting these debilitating injuries long term?
Yeah, I think you have to create a movement toolbox, and the only way to do that is to be exposed to different things. So, like my son, he does jujitsu, plays basketball, baseball, football, like track, you name it, right? Like if I could not have to coach something and him get exposure to it, like that's ideal, especially now with him learning. Like I know, like with Jeremy Fisk, I think his name is on Twitter. Like he basically trains youth athletes, and he has like an obstacle course in a basement. It looks like,
yeah.
It looks awesome. Like I want to go there and run around. Like it looks awesome. And
we need to go. That's field trip.
Oh, it's awesome. Like, you got to look at it.
He does a great job creating movement skills just by exposure to things that these kids should be getting in multiple sports. But like you said, like the specialization side of it. And then once they get to high school, the reason that these kids get hurt is, repetitive movement's a huge part of it. But they lack those reserves. They lack general strength reserves.
Yes.
Again, like you said, you have the example of the girl in the one leg, like, she tears her left ACL. Why? Because repetitive movement, but B, like she's not flexing it. It's probably not as strong as the right leg. Like it's not being emphasized. And if she's not training it, like there's going to be strength deficiencies on that side. So there's going to be compensations that happen. And then, over time with fatigue, we know fatigue is the main primary motivation for injury, right? Like if you're tired, you're more likely to get injured.
Yeah.
If she's stepping on that leg over and over and over again, and it's not strong, eventually it's going to give, right? Meniscus, ACL, all those different things, those non-contact issues. So again, it goes into that as well. So like, like they just lack general, like if you just took these kids and had general training, like my PE class when I first got to high school was weightlifting. Like they didn't teach you, but at least, leg press, something.
Yeah.
Right?
Some kind of exposure.
You had to do something that was training. Like now that like they removed all these from school, they removed all the weight training classes, all these different things, like, and they specialize, and you get all these issues now that are coming up that you saw in college and professional athletes.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're seeing them in 10 and 11, 12
trickle down effect.
boys and girls. Yeah. And, everyone wants their kid to be the best that ever played, right? Everyone wants Aaron Judge as a son. Everyone wants, Lamar Jackson as a son. Well, like, guess what? Like, they're genetically inclined to be good. They've expressed their genetic capabilities, both have, and they train to get to a certain point. I don't want to discredit their hard work, but they still would have been pretty damn good if they never did any training at all.
Yeah.
So again, you want to maximize your genetic potential, but you got to be smart in a way that's not, again, it's chess, not checkers. Like, like my son, like, yeah, he's a beast and everyone, all that. He's an average football player on his team. He's got a bunch of kids that have matured earlier than him. Like, we have a kid on the team that runs 13.3 in the 100-meter dash. I swear, his name is JJ Blanchard. His dad was.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and right now he's a video game. He runs around, no one touches him. Like, I watched my son try to tackle him in practice. It's hilarious. And the typical parent would be pissed off. Oh, we need to specialize. We need to do all this stuff. And I'm like, if he's getting exposed to that now, okay, and those speeds now, when he moves up and he does catch up with the maturation and his speed and his size,
gonna be on.
I laugh my ass off because it happened to me. Like, it happened. I was late maturing. I didn't mature until I was about midway. I didn't really hit puberty hard until I was midway through my freshman year of high school. I went from 5'5" to 6'1". I went from 130 pounds to 165 pounds.
I'm still waiting to go to 6'1".
Yeah,
still waiting.
And my thing was this, like, I didn't catch up on my movement skills until going into my sophomore year. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just clicked, and I was an all-conference football player. And I'm laughing because you can't rush that. You can't rush that, right? Like,
but everyone tries to.
Exactly. Well, what am I supposed to go specialize with my son at 8 years old because I'm pissed off because he can't tackle a kid that literally took second place at AAU Nationals in a 100-meter dash?
No. Well, we have, I mean, even on my son's football team, we know when they're going to score, they hand it to the tall kid. It's like, just hand it to 21 every time.
Yeah,
every time. There's a couple freaks.
But how many kids did y'all play with, like, in whatever sport you play with, 8th grade year, and they were monsters?
I got it.
And then junior year, you never saw them again.
So there was one kid who played varsity as a freshman. I'm not going to name his name. I still talk to him. And I remember first time I ever held a pad in football in high school. He trucked me, dude. I saw cleats. Like, he just ran me over. I was like, oh shit. And senior year, I was being heavily recruited, and he didn't, like, that was it. His freshman year was his peak. And he never, even though he lifted, he did everything, he reached his, physical maturity. He was the same size as a senior as he was as a freshman. Whereas I hit my growth, so to speak, between freshman and senior year. So yeah, there's absolutely, and I usually say to parents, like, we go out there and my 8-year-old's my 9-year-old, he's on the 3rd team in soccer. And that's good because he's built for football. Let's put it that way. But I always tell parents, the kids on the 1st team, by the time they're 15, they'll probably be on the 3rd team, because the kids who are on the 3rd team are usually slower developing, and they usually got that chip on their shoulder, because the 1st team kids don't need to work as hard. Their 1st team, they're scoring all the goals. And then 9 years old, they're not as dominant. 10 years old, they're not as dominant. 11-year-old, they're not. And then by the time 12, 13, puberty hits, it's all over. Like, it's the playing field is level. And I've seen that with 3 kids now. 3 kids where the top players at 8. I could point them out right now. We go to the 1st team game this weekend, Bryce, and I will show you who will not be on the 1st team at 13, 14 years old. And their parents are always the cocky dicks.
Yeah, that's true. But it's I know I've seen it. I know Coach has seen it. That's, people try to rush things so much and so quickly that in all sense of time, it's irrelevant now. It doesn't matter right now. Let kids be kids. Let them go play. Let them actually, try every other sport they possibly can. It doesn't matter if you're the best now. It's the maturation part of it is what just blows my mind, because people just don't either want to understand what's can end up happening. Kind of like you're saying, your son's already getting exposed to high speed demands by a kid who's just absolutely blazing fast. That's ridiculous.
That's
by
awesome.
the way.
That is ridiculous.
But people don't understand, and they really don't want to do the research to actually understand how things kind of work. It's I want to be the best now, and that's all that matters.
Well, I also look at it like, how do you know what you're going to be good at?
Yeah, you don't.
Like, so perfect example, like my son, like he loves football. Football is his favorite sport. He picked baseball up so fast. And then the craziest thing is we signed him up for basketball his first year doing it. So like, you know, being a college coach, the one of the assistant basketball coaches here has a 9-year-old son. And I asked him, I said, hey, can he go over there and just shoot around with y'all and do some drills? And I show up and he's like, how long has he been playing basketball? I'm like, well, today. I'm like, you know, basically today, like outside, like any organized basketball, this is the first exposure to it. He's like, holy shit. He's like his dribbling skills, like he's like a guy that he looks like he's been playing 3-4 years. And like he loves basketball now. You know, like how do you know what your kid's going to be good at? You know, you don't.
But I think people, like, as bad as it sounds, and like I'm what my son is 19 months old. And as bad as it sounds, like people live through their kids. And I say vicariously, but it's definitely not. People try to push them to be what they want them to be. And they don't, like you said, you have no idea what's going to end up happening in, 15, 16, 17, 18 plus years. You have zero clue.
I mean, Thomas went from being a soccer player and now he's a standout wrestler because he tried it. You know, I forced so I had a rule in my house is you had to do 2 sports, a team sport and a combat sport. So my kids boxed first, which was great. Seeing, a 10-year-old girl, throwing haymakers. That was pretty fun. And then they went into wrestling. And now my daughter has specialized. She's a junior in high school. So I'm like, yeah, soccer is cumbersome, especially when you're playing at your level. That's great. But yeah, my kids always played at least 2 sports. And rather than picking the sports, I'm like, pick a team sport, pick a combat sport, go. And that was it. That was my only rule. And it was for what it develops as a human being. Team sports give you different, maturation skills than combat sports. Combat sports are awesome. So like your kid does jujitsu, right? Like that's awesome because there's something, and this is a kind of a masculine thing, something about going head to head, one-on-one. You can't blame the point guard for throwing a bad pass. You can't blame somebody for missing a block. If you get your ass kicked in wrestling or boxing, it's because you got your ass kicked. And there's something mental and physical about doing that. So I always tell people, get your kid into a combat sport. And I mean, the world's a crazy place, bullying in schools, all that stuff going on. I want to know that my sons and my daughter, if push came to shove, they can give it back. So I was always a big fan of having 2 sports mandated, or activities, right? Like, so that was my thing. So and soccer, like all my kids play soccer. I never played soccer. I was a football player. Like soccer players were pussies where I was from, it was like, oh, okay, soccer players, let's go steal their girlfriends. So, it was one of those things where we, that was what my kids chose. And now they're all going different ways. I got one in football. I got one focusing more on wrestling, just playing soccer as a second sport. So, I mean, you're doing the right thing. Your kid's playing more sports than I think exist.
Yeah. He has fun. That's the biggest thing is he doesn't get burnt out.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the pressure these parents put on these kids is like, you need to be good at this one sport. And if you're not, you're letting me down. Versus like what I tell my son all the time is like, the only way I'll be mad at you is if you don't give good effort. Like if you can't play well, like that's fine. Like, I don't care. Just play as hard as you can. Like I remember his first year of baseball, he was one of the worst kids on the team. It was a COVID year. We didn't really play baseball the year before at all. And he was terrible. And then I just said, just keep giving good effort. Like, just give me good effort. And you find out a lot about your kid as well. Like, I mean, we don't want to build fragile kids. Like, they got to get exposed to failure all the time. Amen. And, that's one thing that early on in his football, last year with you got a bunch of freaks on his team and he's a first-year kid playing tackle football. He had his lumps. He had his days. And, he kept wanting to go back. Same thing with baseball. And to me, it's you're building the robustness not only like physically but mentally as well. Like, I don't want a fragile kid. Like, I listen. I grew up in a household where I was told 18 years old, your ass was out. Bottom line, and it was either to a trade school or it was to a college if you got a scholarship. That's the only way you're gonna do anything. But you're out of the house. I graduated and 7 days later, I was at a junior college playing football. Like that's how it was. And, I always knew that I had to make my own way, and I had to make sure that I'm a very competitive person in nature, and my parents fostered that in me. Like they'd always, challenge me. My father specifically, they would challenge me, or, they would make comparisons. I don't know if that's healthy or not. It is what it is. But they would be like, hey, are you as good as Jimmy and Joe down the street? And I used to get pissed off and be like, I will be. Like, if I'm not now, I will be. And that's one thing I've noticed in my son is he's extremely competitive and he likes to compete. He has fun competing. And that's something that I want to foster and harness because, as much as we think the world, sunshine and rainbows, like the job market is competitive.
Bingo.
Okay. Like getting into a good college is competitive. Getting a great job is competitive. Like, I want grandkids. Like having that hot wife is going to be something that's going to be competitive. Like all these things are going to demand that you have a certain type of mindset. And people might call me a meathead and whatever, but like I've been extremely successful because of my competitiveness personally.
Yep.
Like I'm 33 years old and this is my third Division I head strength job. Like I got used because I refuse to I consistently compete with my peers, and I have a bunch of buddies that are head strength coaches all over the country, and I compete just like we're on a pickup basketball game. I talk shit to them and I ask them what they're doing today, and they challenge me and I challenge them, and then I've had mentors like Coach Moffitt. I mean, you could hear how competitive that dude is.
Oh yeah.
And I've had mentors that have imprinted on me, just like him and Paul Jackson. And, I want to make sure that my son has that same mentality, that same mental robustness. Like, because everyone now is so fragile.
And fragility is a thing. Now, I don't know if you know, but I own multiple businesses, and I recently had one acquired. So I still do a lot of stuff, and this gets people mad. I wake up every day wanting to put my competitors out of business. That's how the world is. It's literally nature. Like in nature, if a lion doesn't kill a gazelle, it doesn't eat, it dies, and its kids die. So when you're in the world, for us, it's the workforce. When you're in the world, you're literally fighting. It's just like fighting for a starting position. It's just like fighting for a championship. It's just like all of that stuff. You're going to hurt someone's feelings and kill someone's dream to reach your dream. It's just going to happen. There's only one number one. There's only one first place. My daughter's team, I remember seeing this, like her freshman year, she won a state title in soccer. And I remember seeing it. We're celebrating everything. And then you saw the girls from Franklin High. And you're like, oh shit, like you just ruined their entire year. Like they're going to look back on this and it's going to be the worst moment of their life, but it's the best moment of our life. But that's just how life is. Yeah. Not everybody gets a trophy. And as soon as you understand the direct correlation between work and success, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, not even close. I just outwork people. Like the reason I'm good at business is because I just outwork. There's nobody, even to this day. I mean, there's nobody out there. There could be a couple, nobody I've met who will put in the hours I will put in to make sure that stuff gets done. So that's what we need to teach our kids. But coddling little Billy, and I'm sorry to old kids named Billy, it's just what I go to, or little Timmy, coddling these kids is doing them no favors, because the workforce, and I don't care how woke you are, I don't care what company you work for, if they have hot towels when you walk in the door, at the end of the day, there's a kid coming up through college who wants to take your job. And if you don't dominate that job, if you don't keep moving up the ladder, you will lose that job.
Yeah, and we tell kids on our football team all the time, we're recruiting kids to be better than you to take your spot. And that's in college. Think about that. That's a football team. So imagine, like if I didn't do a good job, they would replace me in a second. So again, like you're 100% right. Like there's that work ethic that has to go and go into it. Like you have to be willing to sacrifice more time and sacrifice more energy. And a lot of these kids coming up nowadays, like I see it with a lot of the interns, like they're like, man, y'all are in at 4, like 4:30, like 7.
Yep.
Like, yeah. And then like I guess they're expecting me to walk in at 6, and I'm already sitting at my desk, and they're looking at me crazy as they walk by, and I'm like, man, this is how you're supposed to do it. Like if you want to be good at something, it takes time. You have to sacrifice. You have to put time into it, and it's going to take more than what you expect and think it's going to take. Yeah. It always does. And there's going to be lumps. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be a whole bunch of things that go wrong, and if you're that easy to quit because you can't handle it, or you fizzle out. Like what's that quote from Roosevelt? It was like, I'd rather wear out or rust out. Well, I'd rather wear out. I'd rather wear out,
Yes.
and that's what I'm going to do. And that's how I'm going to raise my son. It's worked for me, and it's something that I'm going to imprint on him. And I'm going to make sure, he has a high work ethic. And people always ask me, like, he works every day. I'm like, yeah. And I was like, and he likes it. That's the thing, is like, he's not getting burnt out. He's not crying.
He's enjoying it.
Exactly. I'm watching him right now. He's on the football field throwing a ball with some of our players here in college. Like, he's getting exposed to some unbelievable memories and things that he'll remember the rest of his life. And it all revolves around hard work and effort.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
God, it reminds me of putting all those breakfast things together for Northwestern in the mornings at like 4. Good days.
You got to put in the work. And when I had my first job in the real workforce, I found out when the first guy comes in, I found out when the last guy leaves. Yeah. And that's how long I stayed at work. And if I had nothing to do, I created work. And next thing you know, I'm 21 years old, making more money than any 21-year-old I've ever heard of who wasn't in Silicon Valley at the time. This is in publishing. So I think it's just that work ethic that you learn from sports cannot be taught in a classroom. It cannot be taught on YouTube in a TED Talk. It can't be. You have to get out there. You have to understand that there's a direct correlation between work and between success, whether it's on the field, whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's in your marriage. Marriage sucks. You have to work at it because people grow apart. Yeah. By the way, tomorrow my wife and I have been together 25 years officially.
Congrats.
Well, I know you're thinking to yourself, Mark, there's no way you're a day over 25 years old. And I say to myself, no, but look, man, you're preaching all the right things. And before we've done all this kid stuff. Real quick, I like to ask this question. So a lot of people look at us like strength coaches. In your programming, we don't have to go too deep into this. I'd love to follow up, but in your programming, what would you say percentage of your programming is actually strength with weights versus, let's say, movement prep, pillar prep, all that good stuff? So actual weight training of your training, let's say in the off season. So what would be your percentage of weights?
Early off season, it's about 50-50 split. So as far as like speed, training, change direction, all that stuff, to 50% in the weight room. As we get closer to season, it ends up being 70-30. So, and I look at it as a duration, like a time standpoint. Not necessarily reps and volume, but necessarily just time.
So 70-30 would be in favor of field work versus strength work, or strength versus field?
Field work versus strength as you start to get closer to that competitive season.
Awesome. I like to point that out because especially when Bryce looks like a power lifter and I'm actually a pro bodybuilder. So when people come to us, they think we're just going to have people, do all West Side, and while we love us some Louis Simmons and some Laura Phelps, we don't, there's so much more to training athletes than just loading a bar. And we're not training power lifters or bodybuilders. We're training athletes,
Well, the thing is the weight room is there to support movement on the field.
Bingo.
Like, so you're supposed to get stronger so that you could express those forces in movement outside. And people get it reversed. And you see it in my field all the time. Like,
oh yeah.
It's like, and I get it, because in the early stages of strength and conditioning, you had to prove your value and your worth. Mm-hmm. Right. And they didn't have all these technologies. Like, they didn't have GPS, they didn't have all these things to measure and record. What they had was a bar. And they said, well, all of our team now squats, we had 7 kids squat 405. Now we have 47 kids do 405. I did a great job. I should still be getting paid, right? When you look at the early stages of strength and conditioning, because it was so new, the idea of it, like, not many people had it. They didn't see the benefit of it. Well, a lot of people have never gotten away from that.
Yeah. No. Well, and I know you've written a thing on this in the past on Simply Faster. It's just like the mindless conditioning that you see throughout the industry as well. Like, if you go back to your football one on Simply Faster, if you haven't read that, go read it. And breaking down the context, essentially backwards, going from literally the back end of the game all the way through. And people still do mindless 100s, mindless, everything. But in the reality, it doesn't even make sense. But people still do it.
And then they wonder why there's a spike in injuries in camp.
Yep.
Yes.
And a lot of it soft tissue.
Yeah, I mean, how can anyone confidently say, hey, we're going to run 300-yard shuttles all summer, but then we're going to expose them to about 5 to 7 seconds of fast, rapidly changing explosive accelerations and deaccelerations with about 45 seconds rest, and say that they're going to be in shape enough to do that 80 times in a practice?
Yeah, it's just because you see it all the time, and people just, I don't think they want to dive deep enough into it. Like you look, God, what's his book? Game Changer, Fergus Connolly. Going down that paradigm and like what you said about breaking things down. How many rapid decelerations does a receiver have in a game? Like
in a game, no, not even. Like over 2 meters per second, probably right around the 20 to 30 range.
Yeah, and people still wonder why their program or their kids aren't becoming elite as they should. And it comes down to just that finite, brief introduction of people just trying to do mindless shit all the time.
Well, I look at it like this: it's either they're lazy because they know that they know that it's happening, or they don't know the sport as well as they think they do.
Oh, it's definitely. I mean, yeah.
And that's the craziest part is like you get all these teams. Like I've been at a few schools, and every school I've been at has had GPS. Like GPS alone, when you look at this data, like the game is not the same game. Like as soon as you go from interior to exterior, as far as like from lineman out,
it's completely different.
It's insane. It's insane how much different. Like if I were just to put up like a random quiz and be like, "What sport do you think this is?"
Oh, most people will get it wrong, guaranteed.
Yeah, they would have no idea it's football with the differentiation between a lineman and say a receiver. Like they would have no idea. And yet we think that training should be the same for a lineman that it should be for a receiver. Or, we don't prepare them for, like you talked about, like my receivers are entering the accelerations at roughly 14 miles an hour. And versus my linemen are entering the accelerations at 6, but they have 3 times the amount of collisions.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, you could go ahead and say, yeah, it's the same game. We need to train the same cookie-cutter program. Here you go. It's going to check all the boxes. It doesn't.
No. Well, the problem is that, and I know you have stuff to do. I'll try and cut this short. Is that we've outside of what you're doing, where you're in a program, put together a program. A parent goes out and they go to a facility, and the facility is supposed to help kids get into school, get better, whatever. But they've standardized it, which you have to do when you franchise, to the point where it's all cookie cutter. And classes are classes. So I had an issue with my daughter once. You're going to love this. This is my favorite story. She was so their only time to do work with this program, this organization, like what we do, but not, was before their soccer practice. And they literally had these girls doing wind sprints before soccer practice. No prehab, no rehab, no strength, no hurdles, no bands. Sprints for an hour before literal sprints. So what you have is parents they see us talking, and they see us say, hey, you need to do extra for your kids. You need to get with a professional who knows what they're doing. And the problem is that it's become such a business that it's become watered down, where it's all cookie cutter. You're talking about the difference between wide receivers and linemen. I'm talking about the difference between pre-training, so to speak, pre-training strength or whatever, versus just somebody coming in for a session. So the problem is parents have no idea where to go. So you're training elite college athletes, guys who, they're literally, they've gone, the funnel's already closed off. Like they've gone past high school. But the problem is parents are paying extra for this training, but these trainers are not doing what they're supposed to do, which is to make these kids faster, stronger, more resilient. And again, there's a difference between a lineman and a wide receiver. Imagine if I took a soccer player and a bowler, and they're going to give them the same thing. So there's just something to chew on. Is that it's good for us, and that's why we do this. We want to get the information out there so people can kind of do their best to figure out what's best for their kids. And we have a lot of parents watching this. I'm an older guy with a lot of parents, so a lot
of coaches.
Yeah. And coaches. So our whole thing is, how do we do that? So I don't know if you see that in your area, but it's really critical to get the good information out there, because there are a lot of places that are masquerading as professional training institutions, which are simply money grabs.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it like this. I'm like, if you want your kid to get faster, have them run track.
Yeah.
Like in high school, like, you know, like I needed to get faster. And the first thing my receiver coach told me was, well, come and run hurdles for me. And I was like, okay. You know, when I ended up moving to linebacker, my linebacker coach, the reason I started wrestling in high school was because my linebacker coach is like, you have to wrestle.
I tell every football player to wrestle.
And they think we're crazy.
They think we're nuts.
No, it's awesome. I mean, my son's been wrestling since he's 4, you know, and it helps out with so many things. I mean, just general athleticism and strength. But then, like you said, like the intangibles. But whatever it is, whatever you might be lacking, and whatever you think your kids be lacking, there's a sport right now that could probably help them. Right? They're not good at change of direction. Let them play basketball.
Yep.
Okay. Like they need to jump higher. All right, let them play volleyball. Like it's, and they're going to be in an environment where they can make friends. They're going to be in an environment where they can compare themselves and see where they stand as they develop skills, you know, and it's not just you paying someone $500 to train your kid. Because a lot of times this deal with these private facilities, I don't want to knock them because there's a lot of good ones out there. There is. But a lot of these private facilities, like you said, it's very cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's very
a lot of good ones.
You got to fill an hour time gap. I worked at a Velocity way back when.
Oh, shit. That's a long time ago.
Long time ago. Right. And I had to spend 20 minutes in the warm up. I had to spend 15 minutes with speed work. And usually it was like the same speed work. And then I had to give them 15 minutes of general strength. And I'm like, you know, there's not much you can do. Like, what if that kid, you know, you got Johnny over here who's fat. It is what it is. Like, he's out of shape. Okay. Like, speed work ain't helping that kid right now. Like, just general conditioning. Like, he just needs to move around more, you know?
Johnny needs to stop eating snacks. Yeah. Johnny, put down the pizza.
Versus I get a kid like I told you, my buddy, JJ Blanchard's son, the kid that runs 13.3. Like I could put that kid in a legit adult track program right now. And he'll be able to withstand it and he'll thrive in it. Like that's just it'd be like miracle growth for that kid.
Yeah.
But I just don't think people they don't understand what they're actually getting into.
Yeah.
And and that sounds, I mean, it really doesn't matter how it sounds anymore. It's the truth. Like people don't want to actually, you know, people don't either ask enough questions, just do your due diligence as a parent, you know, and majority of the time people don't want their kids playing multiple sports as bad. And that sounds terrible, but it's the truth.
I forced my daughter to wrestle and I literally withheld a car. I withheld a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I'm like, you are not getting, and she wrestled and she won regional. Okay. Never wrestled before. She was great. And she's like, I don't like it. I'm like, cool. We're good.
What about this? How many of those parents are training themselves?
That's
what I look at all the time. Like when I do, like when James does speed work, if I have time, I do speed work with him.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm lucky enough, we have wrestling mats. Like if I want to get the mats out, where me and him are going at it.
Oh yeah.
You know, if he's working out and I have time, I'll work out. You know, like so he's seeing me do it, and I'm the guy. I'm supposed to be the greatest mentor he's gonna have, right? Like I'm supposed to be his example of how to be a man, and he sees me doing it all the time. Well, like just like any son, they want to live up to their father's expectations. They want to be like their dad. Like I wanted to be like my dad. You know, my dad was a mechanic. I suck at working on cars, but I wanted to. Like I always would ask him questions, even though I didn't know what the hell I was looking at. You know, I could change a battery, but that's about it. You know, but I wanted to be like my dad, right? My dad, and I wanted to live up to his expectations. Like my dad was a hard worker. He was an extremely hard worker. Like he worked overtime to pay for Christmas. He worked overtime on Christmas Eve. That's the type of guy he was. So like when people ask me like, why do I work the way I work? Well, I saw it firsthand on how you're supposed to work. Well, the same thing goes for these parents. Like, you want your kids to be better at sport, but you're not willing to get up off the couch and play catch with your kid.
Amen. And that's you know what? I get in trouble for saying this all the time, but my kids don't know any better. They are, it is bred into their mind. It is branded into their brain that they're supposed to train every day because it's all I've been doing. it's what I do every single day. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a pro bodybuilder or a pro athlete or a professional strength coach, but if your kid sees you exercise and stay in shape, you know what? Get out there, play catch with your kid, play ball with your kid, be an active parent. Now that my daughter works, I'll go to the gym, my daughter on her off days, we used to do Sundays. We used to train with the kids, and we still will. It was just got too damn hot. But yeah, we'll go to the park and we'll invite a bunch of our families from Legacy and we'll do our thing. So I think you hit on a great nail. Monkey see, monkey do. Kids who are the product of an addict household, whether it's alcohol or drugs, are more likely to become addicts. And I would say the inverse is true. Kids who are in a fit, healthy household are more likely to become fit and healthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I got to get to a staff meeting, guys.
Well,
no, you're good. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And where can they find you real quick?
At Coach Joey G, either Instagram or Twitter, either or.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, brother.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Too.